Hey everybody, this is Final Flame Productions with another review, rant, discussion video. I don't know what to call them. I always end up ranting at some point about something anyway. Uh, the topic in this video is about the release of X-Men Dark Phoenix. Um, the last time I checked, now it's fluctuating up and down slightly, but on Rotten Tomatoes it was on like 22%, something like that. And that screams an absolute travesty of a film, something that's without any redeeming points or a just complete train wreck. I've seen the film. I seen it on what day did I see it? I seen it Wednesday, and I think it's a film that has a lot of flaws. I found the ending, just the final kind of resolution of the whole movie and the final scene to be a little bit underwhelming, especially for a film that possibly is the end of this group of actors in these roles. I thought it was a little bit disappointing, the ending, but overall, except for maybe a few little script issues, dialogue issues, I thought it was a terrific film. I thought CGI was mostly good. I thought the train sequence was very exciting and very impressive, and I thought the death of the major character was handled pretty well in everybody's reactions. I thought Michael Fassbender and McAvoy were great as always. And there's some interesting and entertaining bits in it. It's by no means the best or the worst X-Men movie so far. But I was going to say surprised, but I'm not really surprised by the reaction it's been getting from critics, because the critics seem to have it out for certain movies, or don't maybe let them away with things that they would let MCU movies away with. And this is kind of the point of the discussion, not only to stick up for Dark Phoenix and the X-Men franchise as it is. I would like to just tackle this kind of double standards that the MCU Marvel movies, such as your Avengers and your Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, those movies seem to get away with more, especially when they make the same mistakes that, say, an X-Men or an X-Men or a Venom may make. Venom and some of the X-Men have made script mistakes, have had kind of muddled, have had muddled villains and plots that really weren't that effective or engaging. But they got a lot of hate for it, especially from critics. Now I know Venom kind of leaned back, or kind of had a little bit of a swing back with audiences, and audiences seemed to accept Venom more so when they got to see it. But the X-Men movies, especially the last two, Apocalypse got a really tough time, and there was flaws in that movie. I mean, the ending was a little bit all over the place, and maybe slightly too over the top with digital effects. But you look at movies like Age of Ultron, which I thought was an absolute piece of trash of a movie. I really hated Ultron. Thor 2, I think I fell asleep in the middle of it. It was just a complete snooze fest. Iron Man 3 annoyed me immeasurably. I thought it was a terrible film. Ant-Man, I love Paul Rudd, but some of the actors in that movie were just nails on a chalkboard. I wasn't impressed with the Endgame either. I thought it was an extremely long and messy film. I've made a rant video on that. If you want to look at it's a pretty extensive review on that. Didn't like that, but I thought to myself after Endgame, it was this really long movie with lots of characters, a lot of messy subplots, a lot of dragged out moments, an ending that was just full of CGI everywhere. And I thought to myself, if another movie like Apocalypse that did similar things, it would get a lot of hate for it. It would say it's overlong, it would say it's messy. But there seems to be this idea with MCU films is that they kind of get treated differently by critics, and I think by a large portion of the audiences. I think critics are slightly scared to criticize MCU movies. Now that might sound like a conspiracy theory, but even myself, whenever I tweet that I don't like Endgame, I get barraged with hate comments, and people, even my review, it didn't get as, actually had a lot of support from people that I think are starting to realize that not all MCU movies are good. And I'm not trying to I'm not one of these anti-MCU or anti-Marvel guys. Um, I think that some of the DCU movies recently have been terrible. And I've loved some of the MCU movies like Infinity War. I loved the first Avengers. I love Winter Soldier. There's loads of terrific movies. I even like Doctor Strange, which is one of those that kind of goes under the radar, and it's not as unpopular to most people. I enjoyed it. But there is a lot of MCU movies, like I listed earlier, like Ultron, Iron Man 3, Thor 2, Ant-Man, I even Spider-Man Homecoming, I thought was an extremely poorly judged movie. Really didn't like it. But all these movies seem to get away with it, even if you like some of them yourself, whoever's listening to this. You gotta admit, there's some of those movies that if they were released by Fox or Sony, they would get slaughtered. People would say, "Oh, this is lame. Why are we watching this?" But for some reason, if it's an MCU movie, if it has a couple connections to other characters people like say there's a cameo from Tony Stark, or they reference some upcoming big movie that people are like, there's sort of a gloss over, and people go, "Ah, well, that movie was fine. I like that cameo," and people sort of, just accept it. Whereas these X-Men movies, the X-Men franchise, X-Men 1 and 2 were just terrific movies. X-Men 3, not so much. First Class was terrific. Days of Future Past is one of the most underrated movies, comic book movies of the last 10 years at the very least. It's a terrific movie. Logan was brilliant. Deadpool. So many great movies under the X-Men umbrella. And in fairness, some of those got received and got reviewed well. But some of the movies that maybe were flawed got extra hate and didn't get away, or maybe didn't get a little bit of a benefit of the doubt on certain ill-judged moments, whereas an MCU movie that did the same thing would get away with it. And it's a thing now that it is becoming a gripe with me that all these MCU movies, by and large, all of them are 70 to 80, if not way more than that, on Rotten Tomatoes, and audience scores are up there as well. And I know that Rotten Tomatoes isn't a bible of to be taken as fact and opinion of the whole world, what they think of these movies, but it is one of the more popular ways to decipher how people are responding and accepting movies. And I think there's been a lot of really poor MCU movies. And X-Men, while it's finished now, I think it's worth comparing how people let movies like that away with it, and MCU movies again and again. You go into an MCU movie and you look at the scores and you see 80 or 90%, and you think, God, this must be a 4-star movie. And there's very few in the last year or two that I think have been 4-star. Maybe Infinity War was up there. I thought Endgame was a mess that people led away with, and people didn't give it the right criticism, because I think what they did to certain characters like Thor and Hulk, the tone was all over the place. The finale was a big mess. Some really lame humor, bad CGI in places, and people just seem to let these MCU movies away with it. And I think people need to call them out. If the standard's been dropped that low, that people are giving really average MCU movies 70 and 80 on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's pretty lame. So going back to Dark Phoenix, I think people should go to see it, but you have to have an open mind. If you're going into it thinking you're going to hate it, and accept or believing this sort of narrative that Fox has never made a good X-Men movie, then you probably should stay at home. But if you're somebody that has enjoyed X-Men movies, you should remember how many good X-Men movies there were. And while not Dark Phoenix isn't a great movie, I think it's very, very entertaining in places and does a lot of right things. So again, what do you think? Do you agree with my sentiments? Do you think that X-Men's getting a tough ride? And do you think that the MCU movies are getting an easy ride for some bizarre reason? I think so. Let me know in the comments.